10. The real meaning of mafia. The word mafia isn't as ancient as most people think. Many assume it comes from Arabic, meaning place of refuge, while others claim it comes from the Sicilian slang mafioso, meaning bold, proud, or fearless. But for the people of Sicily, the word has always meant something far darker: power outside the law. The Sicilian Mafia, also known as Cosa Nostra, our thing, emerged in the 19th century, not as a criminal gang at first, but as a response to chaos. Sicily had just been handed over from centuries of foreign rulers. The island was lawless, corrupt, and poor. Local landlords hired armed guards to protect their lemon groves, estates, and properties from thieves. Over time, these guards realized they could offer protection not just from criminals, but from themselves. That's how protection rackets were born. Shopkeepers and farmers paid money for safety, knowing full well that if they didn't, something terrible might happen to their families or their crops. The mafia created an invisible government, complete with rules, taxes, and even their own justice system. One of their most powerful weapons wasn't guns, it was silence. The infamous omertà, or code of silence, became sacred. No one talked to the police. Betrayal was punished by death. You didn't just join the mafia, you swore your soul to it. By the early 20th century, Cosa Nostra had its hands in everything: citrus exports, local politics, and soon international smuggling. They became so deeply rooted in Sicilian society that even honest citizens feared crossing them. When the Italian state tried to crack down, the mafia didn't disappear. They went underground, stronger than ever. And yet, beneath the legend of the mafia's honor, lay a simple truth. It wasn't about justice or protection. It was about power and the absolute control of fear. Number 9. The mafia's code of blood. How new members were made to become a man of honor in the Sicilian Mafia wasn't as simple as shaking hands. It was a ritual steeped in symbolism, secrecy, and blood. Picture this: a small, candle-lit room. Around the table sit men who never speak above a whisper. In the center, a saint's image, often that of Saint Michael or Saint Rosalia, protector of Palermo. The candidate's finger is pricked, and a drop of his blood stains the holy picture. As the paper burns, he repeats the words, "May my flesh burn like this image if I betray the family." That's not just ceremony, it's a life sentence. From that moment, the mafia owns him. His loyalty is no longer to his wife, his children, or his church. It's to Cosa Nostra. Every new member is sponsored by an existing one, who becomes his godfather in the underworld sense. If that recruit ever betrays the family, the godfather's own life may also be at risk. This ensures total accountability and total fear. There are rules: absolute obedience to superiors, no dealings with the police, no flirting with another member's wife, and, most of all, the mafia comes before everything, even blood relatives. This is why the mafia has survived for over a century. It was not just a criminal gang. It was a brotherhood with a religion of its own. They saw betrayal as blasphemy and revenge as sacred duty. The ceremony itself spread beyond Sicily, to America, to Canada, and beyond. Immigrants carried the ritual across the Atlantic, transforming small Sicilian networks into the global mafia syndicates we know today. But perhaps the most haunting part of the initiation wasn't the blood or the oath. It was the understanding that once you joined, you could never leave alive. Even the name Cosa Nostra reminds its members, this isn't yours, it's ours. Every dollar earned, every life taken, every secret kept, all belong to the family. From lemon groves to global cartels, the mafia's power began with that single ceremony of fire and blood. And for more than 100 years, it worked. Because when you control a man as loyalty through fear, you don't need chains to keep him prisoner. 8. The rise of Lucky Luciano. when the Sicilian Mafia went global. If Sicily gave birth to the Mafia, America turned it into an empire, and no one symbolizes that transformation better than Charles Lucky Luciano. Born Salvatore Lucania in Sicily in the late 19th century, Luciano immigrated to New York as a boy, growing up in the tough streets of the Lower East Side. He learned early that in America, power didn't just belong to the wealthy, it belonged to those who could organize chaos. By the 1920s, Prohibition had created a gold mine for criminal networks. While American gangs fought bloody turf wars over illegal liquor, Luciano saw a bigger picture. He brought the discipline, hierarchy, and code of Cosa Nostra into the American underworld. Instead of chaos, he built structure. He divided territories, established families, and created what he called the Commission, a council of bosses that settled disputes between mafia clans across the country. This was the birth of organized crime as we know it. No more random shootings or sloppy street fights. Luciano ran the mafia like a corporation. Profits came from alcohol, gambling, drugs, and unions. He believed violence was only useful if it served business. Luciano's genius wasn't just in organization, it was in diplomacy. He united old Sicilian bosses with ambitious American-born gangsters. He saw the future not in ethnic loyalty, but in profit-sharing. When rivals clashed, he didn't send hitmen first. He sent negotiators. It was the mafia's version of modern management. Even the U.S. Navy secretly cooperated with Luciano during World War II, hoping his network could protect New York docks from Axis spies. It was one of the strangest alliances in American history, the government quietly working with the most powerful gangster alive. But Luciano's reign didn't last forever. In 1936, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison for running a prostitution ring. Still, his control extended even behind bars. Eventually deported back to Italy, he continued to influence mafia networks on both sides of the Atlantic until his death in 1962. Luciano turned the mafia from a local Sicilian syndicate into a global criminal system. He didn't just make history, he industrialized crime. Year 7. The Mafia's grip on politics and the Catholic Church. In Sicily, politics was never clean, and religion was never far away. The Mafia understood that true power didn't just come from guns or money, it came from legitimacy. And for decades they found it in two places: government and the church. After World War II, Sicily was in ruins. People were starving, unemployment was rampant, and the Communist Party was gaining influence. The Mafia saw opportunity. They aligned themselves with conservative politicians and helped the Christian Democrats win elections by manipulating local votes and intimidating opponents. In return, politicians looked the other way while mafia clans expanded into public contracts, agriculture, and construction. Bridges, roads, and apartment complexes across Sicily were often built by mafia-linked companies. Even the awarding of government tenders became part of their racket. By the 1960s, Cosa Nostra had turned the rebuilding of Sicily into a money-printing machine. And then there was the church. The Catholic Church had enormous power in Sicily. Priests knew everyone's secrets, and the mafia made sure to look pious. Many bosses were deeply religious, donating to churches and attending Mass every Sunday. They kissed the crucifix before ordering executions. Priests blessed their children, and when accused, they justified their crimes as business, not sin. In return, many local priests looked away, either out of fear or complicity. The mafia exploited this image of faith to appear righteous before their communities. In villages where the state's presence was weak, the mafia acted as judge, mediator, and even benefactor. To the poor, they gave food and loans. To the powerful, they offered votes and money. But behind this carefully constructed moral facade lay hypocrisy and terror. When a priest named Father Pino Puglisi began openly denouncing the mafia in the 1990s, he was assassinated in front of his parish. The hitman later confessed he knew killing a priest was wrong, But disobeying Cosa Nostra was worse. This toxic mix of religion, politics, and crime kept the Mafia untouchable for decades. Ordinary Sicilians were trapped in a web of silence, where even God seemed unable to protect them. What made the Sicilian Mafia so powerful wasn't just its violence. It was its ability to blend into the very institutions meant to destroy it. They didn't conquer Sicily by force, they absorbed it. There were six, the pizza connection, and the golden age of heroin. If there was ever a moment when the Sicilian Mafia truly ruled global crime, it was during the 1970s and 1980s, the age of heroin. What began as small-scale smuggling between Sicily and New York turned into one of the most profitable drug empires in history, known famously as the Pizza Connection. The plan was genius in its simplicity. Mafia clans from Sicily partnered with American families, especially in New York, to traffic heroin from the Middle East through Italy and into the U.S. The drugs were hidden inside shipments of cheese, olive oil, and tomato sauce, all routed through seemingly innocent pizza parlors. These restaurants became fronts for laundering millions in drug money. Customers ate slices of pizza, unaware they were standing in the middle of an international drug empire. The operation was coordinated by powerful Sicilian clans like the Badalamenti and the Gambino families, with the profits dwarfing anything the Mafia had ever seen. By the early 1980s, the Sicilian Mafia controlled nearly 80% of the heroin entering the United States. New York alone saw a surge in addiction and gang violence, while Sicilian bosses lived like royalty back home: mansions, yachts, and Swiss bank accounts. But the heroin trade came with a price. Violence exploded between rival clans in Sicily as they fought for control. The Corleonesi clan, led by the ruthless Totò Riina, began a bloody campaign to dominate Cosa Nostra. Dozens of high-ranking mafiosi were executed, shot in broad daylight, blown up in cars, even strangled and dissolved in acid. Palermo became a battlefield. The so-called Second Mafia War left hundreds dead, and the old romantic idea of the Mafia as men of honor vanished. Riina's rule turned Cosa Nostra into a terror machine. Anyone, journalist, judge, or politician, who dared oppose them became a target. In 1984, the Pizza Connection trial in the U.S. finally exposed the scale of the operation. Authorities traced over $1.6 billion in heroin profits. Dozens of Sicilian and American mafiosi were arrested, including Gaetano Badalamenti, who was later sentenced to 45 years in prison. The case marked the end of the Mafia's golden age of narcotics. But it also proved how sophisticated and global Cosa Nostra had become. From a secret brotherhood in Sicilian lemon groves, they had turned into the world's most dangerous multinational. Still, one man's rise during this violent era would define the Mafia's future, and his name would become synonymous with fear itself. 5. The Reign of Terror. Totò Riina, the Beast of Sicily. No one embodied the brutality of the modern Sicilian Mafia more than Salvatore Totò Riina. To outsiders, he was a quiet, short man with piercing eyes and a farmer's simplicity. But to the Mafia, he was il capo dei capi, the boss of bosses, and behind his silence lurked a monster, born in the small town of Corleone. Yes, the same name that inspired The Godfather. Riina grew up in poverty and violence. He joined the Mafia as a teenager after his father was killed in an accident involving stolen dynamite. By his 20s, he had already committed multiple murders and earned a reputation for cruelty. When Riina rose to power in the 1970s, he transformed the Mafia's structure from a secretive fraternity into a war machine. Under his command, the Corleonesi clan waged open war on rival families. He introduced a new rule: fear was more effective than respect. During the Second Mafia War, Riina ordered the assassination of anyone who stood in his way, including fellow mobsters, police chiefs, journalists, and judges. The scale was unprecedented. Palermo was drenched in blood. Whole families disappeared overnight. Even longtime members of Cosa Nostra whispered that Riina had gone mad. In 1992, his madness reached its peak with two acts that shocked the world: the assassinations of judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. These two men had devoted their lives to fighting the mafia. They had led the famous Maxi trial of 1986, which convicted 338 mafia members based on testimony from insiders like Tommaso Buscetta. Their courage had finally put Cosa Nostra on the defensive. But Riina's revenge was merciless. In May 1992, Falcone's car was blown up on a highway outside Palermo with half a ton of explosives. 57 days later, Borsellino suffered the same fate outside his mother's home. The message was clear: no one was untouchable. The Italian public was outraged. For the first time, millions took to the streets demanding justice. The state, humiliated and enraged, launched Operation Clean Hands, a massive crackdown that finally weakened the mafia's power. In 1993, after more than 2 decades in hiding, Riina was captured in Palermo. He had lived quietly in a modest apartment with his wife and children, surrounded by guards and silence. Even behind bars, Riina remained defiant, never speaking, never betraying Cosa Nostra. He died in 2017, still known as La Belva, the Beast. His reign marked the mafia's bloodiest chapter, but it also sowed the seeds of its downfall. Under Riina, the mafia had shown its true face to the world: not honor, not protection, but pure terror. And once that mask fell, even ordinary Sicilians began to turn against the shadow that had ruled them for generations. View 4. The Maxi Trial. How Italy finally fought back. By the 1980s, the Sicilian Mafia was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was running entire cities. Businesses, judges, police, and even mayors bowed to Cosa Nostra. The state seemed powerless, but in 1986, 2 men changed everything: Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. They were not soldiers. They didn't carry guns. Their weapons were facts, witnesses, and unbreakable courage. The turning point came when a former mafia boss named Tommaso Buscetta broke the code of silence, omertà, and agreed to testify. Buscetta had lost nearly all his family to internal mafia wars. He realized that loyalty to Cosa Nostra meant nothing when the organization killed its own. His testimony was explosive. For the first time in history, the inner structure of the mafia was revealed. Falcone and Borsellino listened carefully, compiling thousands of pages of evidence. They uncovered the entire hierarchy, from the capo di tutti capi, boss of bosses, down to soldiers, middlemen, and corrupt officials. They proved that the mafia wasn't just a loose group of criminals, but a tightly organized network with its own parliament, rules, and economy. The result was the Maxi trial in Palermo, the largest criminal trial ever held in Italy. It took place in a special underground courtroom built to withstand bomb attacks. Over 475 mafiosi were charged with crimes ranging from drug trafficking to multiple murders. The trial lasted for nearly 2 years, with 8,000 pages of testimony and over 200 lawyers involved. When the verdict was announced in December 1987, Italy held its breath. 338 mafia members were convicted, receiving a combined total of 2,665 years in prison. For the first time, Cosa Nostra had been struck at its heart, but victory came with a heavy cost. Falcone and Borsellino knew they were signing their death warrants. They lived under constant police protection, moved between secret locations, and never saw their families without security. Yet both men refused to back down. When they were murdered in 1992 by Riina's men, Italy wept, but it did not surrender. Millions attended their funerals. Children carried signs that read, "You didn't die for nothing." The government launched an all-out war against the mafia, freezing assets, seizing companies, and dismantling political networks tied to organized crime. The Maxi trial didn't destroy Cosa Nostra completely, but it shattered the illusion of invincibility. For the first time in a century, Sicilians began to believe that justice was stronger than fear. Falcone and Borsellino became national heroes, symbols of moral resistance. Their names are now etched on schools, airports, and streets across Italy, living reminders that the Mafia, as greatest enemy, wasn't the police or the army. It was truth. Number 3. Omertà and the psychology of fear. If there's one word that defines the Sicilian Mafia, it's omertà, the sacred vow of silence. To outsiders it might sound like a rule, but to those who lived under the Mafia's shadow, omertà was a way of life, a cultural prison built from fear and tradition. In towns across Sicily, people learned early to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. If a crime happened on your street, you didn't see anything. If a neighbor went missing, you didn't hear anything. Talking to the police was betrayal, and betrayal meant death, not just for you, but for your family. The Mafia didn't have to threaten everyone directly. They didn't need posters or speeches. The silence was enforced by example. A man might report a theft one day, and the next, his shop would mysteriously burn down. Another might testify in court, only to find his son missing on the way home. After a few such lessons, whole communities chose silence over survival. This system worked because it manipulated something deeper than fear. It exploited honor. The Mafia presented itself as the defender of Sicilian values: family, respect, loyalty. To cooperate with the state was to betray your own. They painted police officers as outsiders, tools of a corrupt government that never cared for Sicily, as poor. And for a long time, people believed them. It's what made the Mafia so dangerous. They didn't just control crime, they controlled identity. Being Sicilian meant knowing when to stay silent. That cultural grip was stronger than any weapon. But omertà also isolated victims. It kept mothers from reporting their sons' murders. It silenced business owners who were extorted. It turned entire villages into accomplices through silence. As one Sicilian priest once said, the Mafia kills twice. First the body, then the soul. Breaking omertà was therefore revolutionary. When people like Buscetta or later Giovanni Brusca decided to testify, they weren't just betraying the Mafia. They were breaking a centuries-old cultural curse. Each word they spoke was an act of rebellion. Even today, remnants of omertà linger in parts of Sicily, though much weaker than before. Campaigns led by activists, schools, and anti-mafia foundations have taught new generations that silence only feeds the beast. To understand Cosa Nostra, you must understand this. Their greatest weapon was never violence alone. It was the silence that followed it. 2. The Mafia's hidden fortune. How they still control billions. Many people think the Sicilian Mafia died with Totò Riina's arrest, but Cosa Nostra never really disappeared. It simply evolved. The bullets and bombs that once ruled Palermo gave way to suits, bank accounts, and offshore companies. Today, the Mafia's greatest weapon isn't violence, it's money. Investigators estimate that the Sicilian Mafia still controls billions of dollars through a mix of legal and illegal enterprises. Construction, waste management, shipping, agriculture, even renewable energy, all have been infiltrated. Mafia clans learned that owning contracts and companies could bring more power with less blood. Instead of robbing banks, they became the banks. In the early 2000s, prosecutors discovered that Mafia families were investing heavily in tourism, luxury real estate, and food exports. Olive oil and wine labels were often controlled by shell corporations with Mafia ties, allowing them to launder dirty money into clean profits. Some companies even won European Union subsidies for agriculture, using taxpayer money to enrich organized crime. Their influence didn't stop at Sicily's borders. The Cosa Nostra built quiet partnerships with other criminal groups across Europe: the Neapolitan Camorra, the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta, and even cartels in South America. Drugs, counterfeit goods, and cybercrime became a part of a global portfolio. But what's truly shocking is how invisible the modern mafia has become. Gone are the flamboyant dons and public murders. The new bosses, often educated, business-savvy men, operate like CEOs, using lawyers, accountants, and lobbyists instead of hitmen. They attend charity dinners, own soccer clubs, and donate to hospitals. To the public, they look like legitimate entrepreneurs. Yet beneath that surface lies the same old structure, the same loyalty, hierarchy, and silent intimidation. The mafia has learned to survive by blending into capitalism itself. As one anti-mafia investigator put it, they used to control streets. Now they control stock markets. And the irony? The more they act like legitimate businessmen, the harder they are to catch. Modern Cosa Nostra doesn't need to shoot. It simply buys influence. The line between corruption and organized crime has never been thinner. But if you trace the money long enough, you'll always find the same fingerprints: Sicilian, quiet, and ruthless. Cover 1. The Legacy of Cosa Nostra: Culture, Myth, and the Battle for Sicily's Soul. For over 150 years, the Sicilian Mafia has cast a shadow across Italy, a force both feared and strangely romanticized. Hollywood turned it into legend. Films like The Godfather and Goodfellas gave the world a taste of the Mafia's mystique, the loyalty, the codes, the suits, but the truth behind that legend is far darker. In Sicily, the Mafia was never glamorous. It was poverty, silence, and blood. It was mothers burying sons, businessmen paying taxes to criminals, and children growing up believing the law couldn't protect them. Yet somehow, the myth of the noble gangster, the man of honor, survived. That myth still haunts Italy today. Many tourists visit Corleone expecting to find traces of Don Vito Corleone, not realizing the real Corleone was once a town drenched in murder. Locals fought to reclaim their name, opening anti-mafia museums and youth centers to show that their community was more than its criminal past. In the last 2 decades, Sicilian civil society has fought back fiercely. Grassroots movements like Addio Pizzo, Goodbye Protection Money, encourage businesses to refuse mafia extortion, displaying stickers on their shop windows that say they will not pay. Schools now teach children about Falcone, Borsellino, and the victims who stood up to Cosa Nostra. Public marches, art, and documentaries have replaced fear with pride. Still, the mafia's ghost lingers. It's not just about crime, it's about mentality. The idea that power is taken, not earned, that silence is safer than truth. Breaking that cycle is the real war, one that continues long after the last gun has gone quiet. The legacy of Cosa Nostra is therefore twofold, one of terror and one of transformation. The same island that once birthed the world's most feared criminal network has now become a symbol of resistance. Every generation that dares to speak, to testify, to refuse, chips away at that shadow. And maybe that's the final truth about the Sicilian Mafia. It thrived on fear, but it dies in the light. The story of the Sicilian Mafia isn't just about crime, it is about humanity, as darkest temptations. Power, greed, and loyalty twisted into chains. From the lemon groves of Palermo to the skyscrapers of New York, Cosa Nostra built an empire that challenged governments, corrupted faith, and rewrote the rules of fear. But history has also shown that every empire built on blood eventually collapses under the weight of its own silence. If you found this journey into the underworld fascinating, don't let it end here. Hit the like button. Share this video with someone who loves history and mystery, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that uncover the hidden sides of power and crime. Want to go even deeper? Join our channel to access exclusive content, behind-the-scenes research, bonus documentaries, and extended interviews. And if you'd like to support our work directly, Hit the Super Thanks button below. Every contribution helps us keep bringing forgotten truths to light. Because the more we understand the shadows of the past, the better we can see the dangers that still hide in plain sight.